has to be recorded though, is it? Zoom recorded?
Right, yeah.
Ready? So I'll go ahead and call to order the Board of Commissioners public hearing on a land use issue. It is March 19th, 2025 at 1:30 on file number 439-23-00001 LRP. We are also on audio video conference and again in the courthouse auditorium. The purpose of the public hearing is to consider the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, number 2024-002, final opinion and order, which was remanded by LUBA to Jackson County for consideration of the second assignment of error related to the county's previous approval of file number 439-23-00001 LRP, an application to change a portion of the subject's property comprehensive plan map designation from agricultural land to aggregate resource land, and its zoning map designation from exclusive farm use to aggregate removal, and a portion of the property, 324 acres, to the county's Goal 5 inventory of significant aggregate resource sites described as Township 35 South, Range 1 West, Section 01, Tax Lot 100, Section 02, Tax Lot 100, and Section 03, Tax Lot 100. The application was submitted by O'Connor West, LLC, agent for Friel and Associates, LLC. So we have today with us planning staff Ted Zook, Director of Development Services, Kristen Mays, Planning Manager, Charles Bennett, Planner 3, and Pete Philbrick, Senior Assistant County Counsel. So first we'll get a request for admonishment and rules of the public hearing to be read by legal counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The matter before the board today is on remand from the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals, case number 2024-002. This is a narrowly focused hearing. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be limited in scope to the applicable criteria of the second assignment of error remanded from LUBA, which requires Jackson County to identify predicted Goal 5 conflicts between mining and deer and elk habitat and analyze them under the framework of the Oregon Administrative Rule 660-023-018. Subsections 5B through D. Any testimony or evidence not addressing the applicable criteria may be rejected by the Board of Commissioners and excluded from the record of this hearing. A failure to raise an issue in a manner sufficient to give the decision makers or other parties the ability to respond to the issue will waive the right to an appeal based on that issue. We are making a complete recording of the hearing. In the event of another appeal, it may be necessary to transcribe the hearing record. Therefore, when you testify, please speak clearly into the microphone and begin by identifying your name and address so that anybody recording or reading the transcript will know who is speaking. We will first hear from county planning staff, then the chair will open the public hearing and we will hear from the applicant, and then others who wish to testify about the second assignment of error remanded by LUBA. Once everyone has had the opportunity to speak, the public hearing and the record will be closed unless there is a request for a continuance. If no continuance is granted by the board, then the Board of Commissioners will proceed to deliberate toward a final decision. Finally, this is an opportunity for commissioners to announce whether they have potential or actual conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts with respect to the hearing today. If so, the commissioners may discuss the nature of those conflicts or ex parte contacts and address how they wish to proceed. Are there any conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts to report?
I have none.
I have none.
I have none.
That concludes the admonishment. The rules for the public hearing are as follows. Only the chair or a member of the Board of County Commissioners may question a speaker. There will be no interruption of a speaker from the audience and no debates on the floor. Applause is not permitted. A speaker may criticize a proposal, the board, or an agency of the county, but the speaker shall not argue with another speaker directly. Any speaker may present an opposite view, but not in personal terms. A person wishing to speak shall raise his or her hand or his or her Zoom hand and be recognized by the chair conducting the hearing. After being recognized, the speaker shall state his or her name or address before proceeding with his or her statement. The chair may limit the duration of any presentation to the time necessary to cover factual information. Repetition shall be avoided. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So first up, we'll have a report from planning staff.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good
Charles, yeah, thank you. Charles Bennett, Planner 3, Development Services, 10 South Oakdale, room 100. I have just a few slides for us today to present to you, and I will be available for questions afterwards. So just to give you a little background and the audience some background information, the file 1995-4-CPA began the process of approval back in 1995 to add a portion of the subject property to the inventory of significant aggregate resources. And the property, however, didn't get approved until 2006 after several appeals. So it took 10 years to get to where they are at today, which they've been mining the property since 2013. And I have a map in front of you that shows the kidney beans where the approval sites are. It's a little hard to read, but there are, I think there's 4 sites that are approved for aggregate today as we stand. So in November 2023, the Board of Commissioners approved the current proposal, which is to mine the 234 acres. However, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife appealed the decision to LUBA, and in July of 2024, LUBA remanded the decision back to us, and that was concerning only the second assignment of error. On November 1st, 2024, the applicant requested the county proceed with the hearing that we have today. The applicant's findings are based on existing record and are cited in the LUBA record pages. Additionally, ODFW submitted written testimony yesterday, and the applicants did submit a rebuttal this morning. So we have that for you as well, or this afternoon, I guess it was. So we have a lot of new information in a short period of time. But I wanted to talk about the LUBA's second assignment of error, which focused on 2 key components of the applicant's findings. First, the applicant needed to identify the conflicts between aggregate operations and deer and elk. In other words, identify how, where, when, and to what extent removal activities impact deer and elk habitat. The second component is how mitigating those measures, the proposed conditions of approval will mitigate the conflicts. In other words, why the condition is reasonable, why the condition is practical, and how the condition minimizes the conflict. Although the applicant concluded the economic, social, environmental, and energy findings, the EC findings, in the record were not required because the conflicts were mitigated with conditions of approval, the applicant has decided to revise the findings in an abundance of caution. They wanted to revise the findings again, which are detailed on pages 163 of the record and 363 of the record. Sorry about that. Based on the supplemental findings from the applicant or the written testimony from ODFW or new testimony that we will hear today possibly, the Board of Commissioners can either approve the applicant's supplemental findings, reject the applicant's supplemental findings, or continue the hearing to a date certain. And that's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
Charles, I have one question. On the 4 current sites, those are all 40 acres each, aren't they also?
Actually not. I
They're
believe they're bigger than that.
Oh, okay. I just, because
And
current application's all 40 acres.
Correct. During the previous approval, this, and the applicant can correct me if I'm wrong, but they stipulated to 40-acre sizes. So those sites are actually varying sizes.
Okay, I did not know that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any
Anything
other
else?
questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, then, with that, I guess we will open the public hearing and start with applicant.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
My name is Dan O'Connor. I'm with O'Connor West, 670 G Street, Suite B, Jacksonville, Oregon, 97530. And thank you, Charles, and thank you, County Council, Assistant County Council. This is a special, it's a remand proceeding, and so it's limited in scope, just so people in the audience understand, it's not like the initial hearing. And so just to give a little background, because it's been a while since this application was in front of you, is this property has existing mining operations occurring on it now. This was approved through it was like a 10-year process. And so it's not like it's undisturbed land. And so just to refresh your memory on that, in terms of that, and I won't get into the details too much, I'll let Garrett West from my office kind of get into some of the minor modifications we've made to some of the proposed conditions in light of the 170 pages that were submitted into the record yesterday. And so Mr. West was up late so we could get a written response timely filed before this hearing. And so I just really want to break it down, because I know when I worked at the county and with the significant resource in these applications, it's easy to get lost in the weeds with the framework of the administrative rule, which is confusing. And so I was hoping I printed this big enough. I didn't need my glasses, but I was mistaken. I'm just going to break this down, the kind of overall review process real quick. Is when you're trying to establish a new aggregate operation, it applies to this and new ones. It's 4 steps. First, the county must determine whether a proposed aggregate resource is significant, right? You cannot go forward without that determination. In the LUBA order, LUBA specifically cites the county found and is undisputed that the aggregate resources on the subject property are significant. No question. Second, the county must identify the impact area, and it's a statutory 1,500 feet, is my recollection. Garrett knows the details. And then identify potential conflicts with other Goal 5 resource within that impact area. Third, the county must determine whether significant conflicts within the impact area can be minimized, which means reduced to a level that is no longer significant. In the event reasonable and practical measures are identified to minimize all identified conflicts, mining shall be allowed at the site, and an ESEE analysis is not necessary. 4, in the event the conflicts cannot be minimized pursuant to reasonable and practical measures, an ESE analysis in conformance with the requirements of OAR 660-2390 through 660-23-230 must be completed. What the remand was based on is that LUBA determined that the findings related to identifying in minimizing those potential conflicts were insufficient, and that's why we're here. And so we have worked with county planning and council's office, and that's why in the staff report you saw these extensive findings relating to identifying the conflict and how to minimize the impact on the conflict. It's as simple as that. And so that's why you have those extensive draft findings with that staff report that checks those boxes. It addresses what LUBA is requesting. Even in the LUBA order itself, it says the county will likely redraft these findings to meet this standard that they have set forth. And that's the realm we're working in here. And so if you looked at the draft findings, you'll see, well, okay, there's an analysis of the conflicts, how those are minimized, and then at the end, the determination is made those conflicts can be minimized pursuant to the administrative rules, but out of abundance of caution, we are going to do an ESEE analysis anyway. So in the event this is appealed, LUBA says, oh, well, we think you missed the boat on this analysis in minimizing this conflict. We have the ESE analysis in place that also supports this application being approved. Then on this, 170 pages were submitted into the record. We got it yesterday afternoon. And the one thing that's a little frustrating about that submittal, and I will let Mr. West go into detail on it, is that on the first page, it misstates the standard. It's on one of them, it is on the footnote, it's record page 170, where it cites OAR 23-180-1G, and we've cited it in our response, defining minimize a conflict to mean to reduce an identified conflict to a level that is no longer significant. That's half the standard. The actual standard is minimize a conflict means to reduce an identified conflict to a level that is no longer significant. For those types of conflicts addressed by local, state, or federal standards, such as the Department of Environmental Quality standards for noise and dust levels, to minimize a conflict means to ensure conformance with the applicable standard. That means DEQ we have air emission standards, water quality standards. If you meet those state standards, you have minimized the conflict. A large part of the submittal ignores that rest of that standard. And so to say that, oh, well, hydrocarbons or dust that's not based on any standard has an impact, that's not necessary to minimize a standard under law. To say that, somehow the activity is damaging the molecular structure of an oak tree or something like that, that is not the standard. On those type, it needs to meet the state, in this case, the state DEQ standards. And so with that, I'm going to turn over to Garrett West, because he drafted the response to the 170-page submittal. And in response to that, we have some minor modifications to the conditions of approval. And before I turn over, I'm going to tell you what I told LCDC, a year ago before this started. This is not the application to attack. This is a well put together application with geologists, wildlife biologists. The list continues. Constantly reaching out to ODF and W throughout this process for suggested mitigation measures. We were shut down until the bitter end. You may remember that at the last hearing, their mitigation was, well, just deed restrict an unrelated 640-acre parcel, which would have put the county in a difficult position of trying to administer a take. And so I just want to say that because this application has not been sloppy on any level. The impact is already there. It's just logical to, why don't you concentrate the impact and mitigate it as best you can through the measures we're proposing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Garrett and we'll reserve right of rebuttal. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Garrett West, 670 G Street, Suite B, Jacksonville. I spent most of the evening and early this morning going through the ODFW submission so that we could file a written response for the record. As Dan O'Connor stated, this is an order correction. Step one, identify all the conflicts. I've combed through the thousands and thousands of pages in the record to find every single conflict that has been brought up. With the submission from ODFW yesterday, I combed through that letter to identify every single conflict, whether large in scope or technical in nature, and wrote supplemental findings that can be added to an order saying this is a potential conflict. These are things related to direct loss of deer and elk habitat, for example. We addressed those in our original submission a couple years ago. We addressed them in our proposed findings for this order, and I've added additional conflict analysis in our supplemental findings. And we've gone through that with vegetation loss and habitat fragmentation, connectivity and disruption of migration routes, temporal loss of habitat, noise pollution, dust and air quality impacts, increased human presence and infrastructure, local road impacts. Really just like every single thing we could find to say, if LUBA wants us to identify every single conflict, there they are. So we say that this is a potential conflict, this is how it's a conflict, this is when it's a conflict, this is the potential nature of the conflict. That ends the first part of that analysis. You know, now that we know how could we be impacting really the environment or the habitat around us, okay, step two, what do we do about it? And we've gone through many, many rounds of discussing exactly how to minimize not only the particular conflicts, but the overarching scope of conflicts in general. What can we do with potential future mines to make sure that the disruptions are as minimal as possible? Now, these kind of minimization procedures, as Dan O'Connor said, you know, they need to be reasonable. So a minimization procedure that would say no mining at all, that's probably not reasonable for an AR zone. It's probably not reasonable in any case. And so you kind of have to look at it both individually and collectively. Going through ODFW's submission yesterday, you'll note that there are several scientific reports and articles attached to that submission. Many of them look highly technical in nature. They have various studies and literature reviews enclosed in there. I went through them last night and reviewed them in depth. Some of the things that ODFW placed in their letter are supported by those studies, and we have addressed them in our response. Other things that they were stating and relying on their citations and their scientific studies for, I do not believe those scientific studies support. And I have detailed in our response why those scientific studies do not support those conclusions. For example, there are various assumptions in ODFW's letter regarding noise impacts, basically implying that any human noise of any kind anywhere near deer will drive deer completely out of the area. That's not supported by these studies. One of the studies relates to the development of a large-scale mining operation in Nevada, thousands of acres that are being mined at the same time. Even there, the deer were still getting relatively close to those mining pits. We're not proposing thousands of acres being mined at one time at all. We have agreed consistently that we should be limited to 40 acres at a time to condense and minimize conflicts as much as possible. So really, this supplemental finding just goes through step by step to talk about these assumptions and the potentially incorrect statements that were made in ODFW's letter. With ODFW's proposed mitigation measures related to the changes they would like in the conditions of approval, We also went through and we analyzed those potential changes to the conditions of approval. We've always been open to discussing with ODFW and other partners what exactly do we need to do to make sure that not only does our community have sufficient aggregate for the long run, but we're being good environmental stewards of our land. We have proposed some changes to our conditions of approval in light of ODFW's positions. We argue against some of their particular language that they've brought about because we don't believe that those positions are reasonable. We don't believe that those would satisfy the law. For example, ODFW has proposed that we limit ourselves to one 40-acre quarry site at a time, which we agree to. But they also say that that 40 acres, that only 40 acres can be either mined and reclamated at the same time. So you could never exhaust a quarry, initiate reclamation, and then begin a new quarry. Their arguments would be that you exhaust a quarry, you close it down, you reclamate for a century, and then you can open up a new quarry. That's not reasonable. That doesn't make any sense. So what we've proposed are at the end of our supplemental findings, talking about phase closures and how we make sure that there's site stabilization, grading, erosion control, soil restoration, standards that anyone will be able to check with in decades from now to make sure, yes, these sites are progressing as planned, restoration is underway. Although restoration takes a long time, we have a plan and we're executing it fully. At the same time with, different kinds of quarry sites opening up in the same way. There were various arguments in ODFW's letter, in particular in the footnotes, targeting potential noise and dust emissions on the sites. As Dan O'Connor stated, there are various state programs and local programs that highly regulate noise emissions and dust emissions. With the current quarry that is operating on the site, there are all these conditions of approval that regulate those things as well and restrict what can be done on the site. Everything from wheel washes to water trucks watering the road, things of that nature. Noise studies anytime you have to open a new quarry, things that we've replicated in our proposed conditions of approval and that the board approved last time. But in light of ODFW's concerns, we are proposing more intensive ways to go about noise studies in the future to ensure that anytime we need to do a noise study, it's not just a general, how loud is this operation? It's what's the noise of the haul road? What's the noise of rock crushing? What's the noise of blasting and processing? So we can take multiple points of view for a noise study and understand the whole scope of things. That kind of noise study would need to explain how impacts could be reduced if DEQ levels would be exceeded, and that those mitigation measures would need to be implemented prior to a new quarry coming online. That way we know if this kind of quarry is coming online and the blasting is going to be too loud, it's going to exceed levels, it's going to disrupt deer or elk to a significant level, we'll mitigate that. We'll have to find ways to do that. And there's enforceable mechanisms for the county to force the quarry operator to do so in the future. That's replicated in a potential dust study we're recommending. That way, it's just like the same as sound, but with dust. And then there were various comments in the ODFW letter related to Condition 9, which concerns reclamation. If you see in their letter at their page 6, they basically have crossed out most of Condition 9. This was a surprise to us because I felt like we spent the last several years carefully crafting Condition 9 to satisfy their desires. We're not proposing to abolish Section 9. For example, we had spent significant time negotiating, anytime we open up a new site for mining, we have to allocate $40,000 in 2023 money to site enhancements. That's not restoration. That's saying we're about to take away some acreage from deer and elk habitat, we should go and improve some acreage nearby so that those same animals have sufficient habitat to go to. So we've just allocated, or refined that condition of approval to satisfy ODFW's specific requests. Lastly, with the ESEE analysis, ODFW is criticizing the fact that we're engaging in an ESEE analysis. Now is the time to do so. I don't think it would be appropriate to have an order without it, to go up to LUBA, for them to reverse and say, oh, nope, you actually did need to do it. It just doesn't make any sense. So we have a very significant ESEE analysis throughout the record. There's probably like 3 or 4 of them, all of which can be combined into a single order by staff. So I know that's a lot. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or Dan O'Connor can.
I just had one question. Mr. O'Connor mentioned that the standard was to mitigate to an insignificant level or to a established standard, agency standards such as DEQ. There are no standards in habitat mitigation, statutory or industry standards that can meet that threshold. That would be more on the dust and the transportation, things like that. Is that
For habitat rehabilitation?
Yeah.
My understanding is for rehabilitation, there are certain standards that are in the industry. You need to bring back soil if it's just a rock base in a quarry, for example. You need to go through and you need to engage in replanting, preferably with native plants to make sure it becomes more of a habitat, things of that nature.
okay?
But I don't think there's anything codified in law.
But that's the distinction then.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you for your time. I think Dave Friel might pop up.
Okay.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Dave Friel. I live at 580 Powderhorn in Jacksonville. I'll be brief. We worked for over 2 years with staff here at the county on our application. We hired a wetlands consultant, a wildlife biologist, an engineer, a soil scientist, a geologist, a regular engineer, and a surveyor to fulfill our application and meet all of the criteria for the county. So I think we went the extra mile. And I just want to reiterate that this is private property. I pay taxes on this. We're not asking to mine city property, county property, national forest. This is private property, and it's zoned EFU, and it's an allowed use on EFU. And when you look at where our quarry is, we have no neighbors on the north side, one neighbor on the west side by Highway 62, and several neighbors that are along Butte Falls Highway. And for an acreage, for a 2,000 acre parcel total, to have that few neighbors and conflicts is almost unheard of. And we have the ability to put our product on Highway 62 directly, not on small rural roads that are not really built for perpetual haul trucks, big haul trucks. One of the planning commissioners mentioned during the hearing, when we did the planning commission hearing, that there's approximately 2 million acres in Jackson County, and about 500,000 acres have been developed. So that means there's like 1.5 million acres of deer habitat. I have deer in my front yard in Jacksonville. So there's a lot of area. We're stipulating to mine 1 40-acre parcel at a time. So out of 1.5 million acres, a 40-acre parcel is like a couple of thousandths of 1%. It's like a grain of sand, relatively speaking. I don't know what the gentlemen from Fish and Wildlife that are here did for the folks in the Upper Road last week, but we loaded and hauled off 3,600 tons of processed aggregate out of that quarry last week. It went for new construction, it went for maintenance, it went for repairs from the storms that have happened in the last few months. We were there for the folks in the Upper Road. I heard a couple weeks ago from a very good source that the pit in Eagle Point, the Greb pit, will be shutting down shortly because they're out of product. They've mined to the boundaries. That quarry is going to be gone. That means we will be the only source for the upper road. You as commissioners have an opportunity to protect this site by rezoning it. We've stipulated one 40-acre site at a time. And this is a 50 to 75 year and quite possibly a 100-year resource for Jackson County. We've met or exceeded every single test on the rock, far superior to ODOT minimum standards. So this is something you can set aside for Jackson County for the next 50+ years. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions.
No questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't have a sign-up sheet. I don't know if we have one today. I get to have it. Thank you. Okay, so we've got Fred Kuos. Fred, come on up. I will mess up your name if I say it. And give your name and address for the record, and
I didn't want to be first, but I will.
well, you're not. You're fourth, fifth.
Public. Yeah, my name's Fred, and last name's Cuozzo, Cuozzo. I spent quite a bit of time in this room 10 years ago, I guess it was, or maybe more than that now, when he initially tried to get the approval to get the thing started. And I think that the rock pit that's going now is like 20 acres, right? 26 acres. Now, I finally, after 10 years of fighting it, am resolved with the fact that he's got the rock pits there now, but I don't know what's been done for mitigation on the one that's there now because they aren't even done with it yet, I don't think. And I'm to assume that after that one's done, they move on to the next one in line and not from here to the end and work back this way. I don't know how that works. I mean, I've heard a lot of noise or comments about noise and the elk and deer and whatnot, but I haven't heard much about for the people. And there's more than just a few, actually, that are being affected by it. Right now, the one that's going is probably, it's the furthest one from all the people on Butte Falls Highway, pretty much, on that stretch of the road. But as they increase the size of each one further down up to the west or east, I mean, from 40, each one, I haven't seen anything that tells me exactly how big they're going to be. And also the map that was included with the paperwork I got, you can't even make it out. I even used a magnifying glass and I couldn't make it out. I mean, to submit something that you can't even read is kind of, makes it a little hard to comment about it. And I had a pretty big box full of records of all the last stuff that went on to get it all approved, but it burned up in my barn after the South Obenshain fire, so I have nothing to go back to review. The elk used to be all around me and the other guy sitting back here, one of my neighbors, and it was a good 10 years before they came back after the first one opened. I was really surprised. Now they just showed up like they used to be about maybe, I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year ago. So they're kind of filtering up that way. Matter of fact, where the next two sites are is where they're hanging out. I guess I'm concerned about the noise from when they start blasting closer to me. I can hear it from, I'm probably 2 miles at least from where the other one is. Now it's going. I hear it perfect when they, and I can see the dust coming up, you know, so as they move closer to me and everybody else, it's going to be a problem. I can just see it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
I have reviewed the thing that Fish and Game is submitting, and it's pretty accurate, everything that they put in there. I didn't see anything that was out of place. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. And so next on the sign up is Tim Finch.
My name's Tim Finch. I live on Butte Falls Highway, and I border directly to the Friel property. And I'm probably the closest neighbor. I have 127 acres. That's why he doesn't have a whole lot of neighbors right next to him, because I'm pretty much it. And I've been there since I was 3 years old. And I've got 6 game cameras back there, and I used to get 60 to 1,000 pictures of elk and deer every year. In the last 10 years, I have not seen any elk until the last 6 months, and I've got 6 pictures of elk. So you can't tell me that that pit has not affected the animals. And if he thinks he's not hurting anybody, get your checkbook out, write me a check, and I'll sell you the place. Because it's affected the value of my property. It's affected livelihood, because all you hear is cats and trucks and backup beepers. That's all you hear, and explosions. So I think the elk and the deer have been, the only thing that hasn't been damaged is the turkeys. Turkeys will go anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. And Greg Hawley.
Hi, I'm Greg Hawley. I'm at 2299 Butte Falls Highway. I'm kind of new there, been there about a year, so I'm kind of learning what's going on here. We do have the horse ranch right below all this, right where he has some site plans. We do quite a bit of breeding. We have a Eagle Point equestrian team, Crater equestrian team, right up there, usually on weeknights. I say we got baby horses, a lot of kids riding, and we really wouldn't appreciate, blasting and equipment running above us and our property. That's about all I have. If this does proceed to go through, I would appreciate notification of anything that's going to happen in the future, because I would hate for anybody to get hurt. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's nobody else signed up, but if anybody else would like to speak, you can sure come to the microphone and give your name and address for the record.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Roberts. Matthew Vargas, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm the Rogue District Wildlife Biologist here. We have nothing additional to add at this time as far as testimony goes beyond what we submitted in comment letter yesterday, but if you guys have any questions for us, we are available for that. So.
Any questions?
I just have one question. This testimony comes in, always seems to be at the last hour, the last minute. I understand there's a lot of work to do, but is that a tactic or a strategy? I mean, is that something that ODF&W does to make it difficult to, because it does make it more difficult to really digest?
Yeah, and no, it's not, and I apologize for that. ODFW ourselves were just officially notified that this proceeding was going to happen just a couple weeks ago, so it was last minute for us as well. And between coordinating with our office and our Habitat Division in Salem, Department of Justice, there's a lot of projects going on throughout the state, so we tried to get to you as soon as possible once we knew that this proceeding was going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody online? And if you'd like to speak, raise your Zoom hand and we'll bring you in.
Madam Chair, at this time, no one has their Zoom hand raised to speak.
Okay. It's your last chance if you want to speak. And so, do we want to rebuttal then before we close up the hearing?
I just wanted one clarification.
Okay.
With the 40 acres to be used at one time, that's includes storage of any aggregate. It also includes any machinery. So it's not going to be one pit that's 40 acres in size. It has to have all these other components in it as well. I just wanted clarification for the record.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
And a question then on that is, one of the comments was, what is being done about mitigation efforts now?
So the current conditions of approval that are imposed on the property from that 1995 and 2006 order have a it's a laundry list, just like the ones we're proposing. It has dust mitigation from watering the road to make sure there's not too much dust from there. It has wheel washes for the hauling trucks to make sure there's no track out onto the highway. There is requirements that a certain number of, or the people within a certain distance of the pits be notified prior to blasting. There's noise studies required prior to opening up new pits. There's berm construction that is required as part of that noise study. It's a pretty significant list, and we've incorporated all those conditions wholesale into this new proposal, along with additional restrictions. For example, currently there's no 40-acre limitation on the property. Hypothetically, someone could go out and mine everything that's AR zoned right now. So we're proposing to really shrink that and add additional restrictions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Commissioner.
So, Mr. West, it's safe to say that the new conditions are more stringent and have more conditions than the prior that you're operating under currently?
Far more stringent, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you. So with that, we will then close the public hearing. And no, I'm sorry. Public hearing is closed. How many exhibits do we have?
There are 13.
I'll move to admit Exhibits 1 through 13 in the Board of Commissioners record into file number 439-23-00001-LRP and to close the record.
Second.
And we'll move to a
I
motion.
think she needs to,
Yes?
we need to vote on that.
Commissioner Dyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Sparacino?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes. And move to a motion.
So we're moving on to deliberations.
Yeah. Do we want to deliberate first?
Oh, I'll make the motion. So, based on the evidence and testimony, I move to approve file number 439-23-00001-LRP, thereby changing a portion of the subject property's comprehensive plan map designation from agricultural land to aggregate resource land, and its zoning map designation from exclusive farm use to aggregate removal, and add a portion of the property, 324 acres, to the county's Goal 5 inventory of significant aggregate resource sites described as Township 35 South, Range 1 West, Section 01, Tax Lot 100, Section 02, Tax Lot 100, and Section 03, Tax Lot 100. The application was submitted by O'Connor West LLC, agent for Friel and Associates, LLC.
Second.
And so open for
Sure,
deliberation.
yeah. Obviously, there are always impacts and consequences between competing uses and, neighbors that are, again, activities that take place on various properties. And we have this process, and this process required us to identify those conflicts. And looking at the list of conflicts that were identified, direct loss of deer and elk habitat, vegetation loss and habitat fragmentation, connectivity and disruption of migration routes, temporal loss of habitat, noise pollution, all those. I think it's a fairly exhaustive list of potential impacts. And then the proposed conditions and how they're substantiated, to me, meets the standard, exceeds the standard. I think, reasonable, it's more than reasonable these proposed conditions and the potential that they will, and in my opinion, absolutely will, reduce the conflicts and mitigate the conflicts to an insignificant level. So for that reason, the motion that I made, feel that this application should be approved.
I can't add anything to that. I agree with what Mr. Dyers just said.
Well, I will say, when we approved this before, we had 7 pages addressing what I thought addressed the conflicts with the 40-acre minimum. And I assumed with the coordinated effort between ODF&W and the applicant. And so it was brought back to us with hundreds of pages specifying the conflicts and addressing those, which we just got them today. And I think did the best that I can see that it addresses those conflicts. Whether it addresses them, I guess we will see. It is, and like I say, it is 40 acres. As far as the applicant's property, that's 3% of the property, you know, of the 1.5 million acres. It is a titch of the property, but it is a smidgen of that property that is affected, and I think it is the best effort of mitigating those impacts. And I know I drive that 62 space, and I see what is done from the roadside as far as dust mitigation and the roadside part a lot, but and I would move to support that as well in the plan. So I do support it as well. And I think the mitigation as far as noise, the notification, the dust, and the reclamation efforts, I think are really necessary. And I support that for those reasons as well.
Commissioner Dyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Sparacino?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes. And I would ask staff then to prepare an ordinance of approval and set the dates for the first reading for April 9th, 2025 at 9:30 in the courthouse auditorium and audio-video conference. And second reading for April 23rd, 2025 at 1:30 in the courthouse auditorium and also an audio-video conference. And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.